Kicking off the list at number 10, Katie rocks. You ever hop in the shower first thing in the morning and it feels like literal paradise? Otherworldly, some would say. Well, a new TikTok trend has me meditating in the shower now, apparently. Here we go. TikTok users left, right, and center are stepping forward, or rather backwards, with their claims on entering parallel universes. Nashville model Katie Rocks recently kicked this off, and she used the social media platform to recall a 2017 trip to Paris that some of her classmates claimed missed the flight, although Katie saw them with her own eyes. I remember walking on that aircraft past two of my friends and sitting like 3 rows behind them. Then the 4 of us took a taxi back to the apartments we were staying in while we were in school, and I distinctly remember this. 2 days later, they're talking about how they weren't 3 rows in front of us, and to this day I have no idea why they remember missing the flight. That's way too close to the plot of Final Destination. Honestly, this creeps me out just reading about it. I can't even begin to unravel this one. No way. The same user, Katie Rocks, posted again a month later, this time saying she's since discovered the ability to shift realities. Showers. Hot showers are the key, apparently. I would have guessed baths, but showers are cool too. We'll take those. Number 9, a familiar face. Username High Life No Miller Lite posted this one a couple months back on Reddit. Great name also, gotta say, that's a really good name. It's since got a lot of attention, let me know what you think. They say, I'm from a very dry, hot state in the US, and I was visiting California on a trip with my wife. While out eating, we both witnessed a person that looked exactly like me. Same typical mid-fade and head dents inherited from my father. Same body type, only chubby rather than my more slim and athletic frame. I saw the side profile from the back as they walked away from view, and it was my exact face. That's so creepy. My wife had a direct view but could not remember directly what my face looked like. But she noted similarities from my body to head and even the way that I walked. I couldn't believe what we saw. Any thoughts? Question mark. I mean, if you didn't mention the head dents and got that specific, this wouldn't have stuck with me like it did. I also love the subtle roast on the other you. You're like, yeah, this guy was just like me, only, you know, not ripped. Otherwise, that's quite creepy. Thanks for sharing. Number 8, quantum leap. So yeah, I went down that rabbit hole I talked about and I discovered another TikTok. How fun, we love these, awesome. This quantum leap was obtained by Marian Valenza. She took to the social media platform to implore others to take the leap. You know, no more manifestation Mondays. The key to these quantum leaps is a hot shower. Yeah, a hot shower, how convenient is that? Thank God it doesn't suck, you know? Thank God it's not a cold ice bath or else no one would know. Valenza explains the first rule here. Number 1 is that you want to give yourself enough time because you don't want to rush this. Obviously, you want to do this with intentionality, she says. Yeah, sorry I'm late, boss. I don't want to rush my hot quantum shower. You know how it is. He's like, oh yeah, classic. Next step is to literally visualize the water cleansing you so that it removes all your limiting beliefs, the negative thoughts that you have, all the things holding you back from stepping into your higher self. Visualize not currently being late for work. And then there you go, you're set. I'm gonna try this tomorrow morning. I'm just gonna have a hot quantum shower and arrive at 10:15. Number 7, Sleep Street. This one comes from username Oopsies. It's like oopsies, but with a bit more Reoccurring dreams have never been so haunting. Forgot it's a dark list. Here we go. Ever since I was a teenager, I've dreamed about an alternate life where I go to university and work in a city that I've never been in. It started around when I was 16 or 17 and now I'm 25. It's super detailed where I go on hikes, I hang out with friends, I bike through neighborhoods and do mundane everyday life things. The university is outside of a major city and I'm always exploring nature, beaches, islands, all that jazz. Last night I was feeling sick and in return had one of the most vivid dreams I've had in a long time. I met someone and developed a deep relationship that felt incredibly emotional and real. Luckily I woke up right when I was trying to navigate Google Maps to drive to a park, so I remember the streets that we were on. The street was called Dutch Island Road. I never heard of it in real life, so I decided to look it up. The only thing that popped up was a rural area in Rhode Island. It wasn't exactly the same layout of the roads I remember on the map, but the nature and area looked eerily similar to what I saw while driving. I start looking around the area, clicking different locations, and I start to freak out on how everything looks just like in my dream. Mind you, I've never been to Rhode Island, but the weirdest part is that specific buildings in the Rhode Island University and Warwick area ones, those are the same ones that I saw in my dream all the time. I've always thought that my dreams are a glimpse of living an alternate universe, and I feel like this detail solidifies the potentiality of it being a reality. Thoughts? Too many big words. Those are my thoughts. Potentiality. I'm gonna start using that in the next list. You'll hear that from me in the future, for sure. Otherwise, so scary. Hope that goes away. Or doesn't? I don't know. Do you like it? I wouldn't like that. If I dreamt about an alternate life, I'm like, yeah, I actually have 2 jobs. It's exhausting. I never sleep. Number 6, good times, dad times. Coming from Reddit user Apprehensive Humor 55, they say, when I was young, from the ages of around 3 to 10, I was truly convinced I'd already lived a full life. I remember being around 40 years old with a wife and 3 kids, 2 boys and a girl, and then one day I just woke up as a child and my past was all just a big blur with random memories that would come to me here or there. I'm smiling because this is funny, but like it's so scary. This is my biggest fear, I think, in life. It made no sense. My parents said that I used to tell stories about when I was a dad, and they would just laugh it off and be like, oh, that's your imagination, obviously. But deep down, I genuinely did have these strange memories of a past life. For instance, when I was 4 years old, my family went to Disney World, and the whole car ride down, I was telling stories about when I was a dad and I went to Disney World. Just a kid in the back seat with milk, like, oh yeah, these roads. Still haven't fixed them. The weirdest thing is that when we got to Disney World, I knew that I'd already been there before. I knew where everything in the park was and was essentially showing my family everything. At that time, my family just thought it was weird that I knew where everything was, but at the time in my head, it all made sense. To me, I just knew where all the rides were because of when I was a dad. After a while, I stopped telling these stories of when I was a dad because my siblings would always make fun of me for it. I'm not laughing at you, I'm laughing, this is my worst, I'm laughing at you a little bit, this is crazy. Eventually, I just started going on with my life and haven't thought about much of it since, although I wish I did because the memories back then were much more vivid and real than how they are now. He's gonna be so confusing 30 years to his kids. He's like, when I was a dad for the first time, Disney was way less busy. Kids are like, first time? What other family? What are you talking about? Why is mom crying? That's so scary. I buy into this. I don't know, the afterlife, maybe that past dad died and then you were reborn? I don't know, that's scary. I don't want to think of it. Number 5, spirit animal. Do you believe in spirit animals? I kind of do. I want to, at least. Ever since I watched Harry Potter, I always wanted a Patronus. Mine would be a frog for sure. It'd be like a little lanky frog. Wouldn't be cool at all. This next one makes me want to believe. Coming from user Less Cold, they say, about 30 years ago, I was a young college student heading back to college after break in an overnight bus. I was about 19, didn't drink or anything, had no history of mental illness, and was reading a book when seamlessly, I wasn't in the bus anymore. I was now swimming around a rock formation which I knew was part of my hunting territory and was chasing a fish, which I then caught in my mouth and could feel the bones crushing between my teeth and it wriggling against my whiskers. That's how they posted it, no in between. They're just like, yeah, I was reading a book and all of a sudden, I'm a fish. I was totally at ease. I was fast and agile and I could feel the drag of the water, like, you know, the pull of the current, question mark. I like how they included that, mansplaining the current of the water. They're like, I being a fish know this, but do you know about this? I'm like, yeah, we know about currents, man. I'll continue. As I moved effortlessly through it, I knew my body and where I was going and what I was doing, and there was no alarm whatsoever that anything was amiss. You know, I didn't realize that I was really a 19-year-old on a bus. The whole experience couldn't have lasted longer than 30 seconds or so, and then just as seamlessly as I once was there, I was then again back on the bus. I remember sitting there for a second, staring at the page of my book before, you know, having a WTF just happened reaction kicked in, and then I had a bit of a mental freak out. Then a few years later, I saw a documentary about sea otters, and I knew then that that's what I had been for that brief moment in time. I knew it's impossible, but it happened to me, and surely I can't be the only one. I don't know, man. I've never been a sea otter before. Chris, have you been a sea otter? You don't think so. You don't think. You never know. Never say never, though. Has anybody ever heard of something like this, or has it happened to you? Have you been reading a book, and then all of a sudden you're a sea otter eating a fish with whiskers? If so, sound off down below. Sea otters are just smacking the keyboard. They're like, help me switch back. Number 4, switching universes. Coming from Mulks23, this one is so specific that it may very well just be real. Honestly, I'm a little convinced. I've been wanting to share this for some time now. A few months ago, one morning, I believe when I woke up, I did so to a different universe. Similar to ours, but different in some aspects. Before I went to sleep the night before, I kept my Surface tablet on my nightstand, and it was absolutely fine. The next day when I opened it though, I could see a large crack across the top. There's nothing, repeat nothing, that could have caused the crack. I was disappointed, of course, the tablet's new, but I didn't think much of it. However, over the course of the following days, I noticed some things/events are significantly different than how I remember them to be. An actress that I know was married to a gangster, is happily now married to a businessman. A different actress married said gangster, a name that I would have definitely known. I'm from India and I settled in US, and this is a Bollywood actress in question. A series that was being released on Amazon Prime is now on Netflix, question mark. Yeah, that happens all the time. I'm still asking those questions myself. I'm watching Harry Potter on like 3 different platforms, like what's going on? The movie Morbius, I've seen this movie. I thought they must have remade this or something, but nope, it was a new movie. A few other things as well, but those I can attribute to misplaced memories. Not the above though. Also, I definitely did not hit my head or anything which could have caused me to remember things differently. I mean, after all of that, I gotta ask, how is Morbius? It doesn't look that bad, honestly. Hope Spider-Man's in it. Thanks for sharing, Mulks23. Hopefully you're in the right universe. Number 3, cosmic commute. This one has me stumped, folks. I'm not gonna lie. Username IcyFlame2U says, in January, I left my friend's home at almost midnight. I live not even 10 minutes north of her. I remember getting in my car and then boom, I'm pulled over by the police. It's 2:10 a.m. now, and I'm 1 hour north of her, close to crossing state lines. In a city I have never been to, I don't even know how to get out there and what freeways I took, as we are not really close to any freeways. How did I get there, and what happened to a whole extra hour? When I returned home, I was having such anxiety from it all that I was throwing up and everything. We just don't understand what happened. The comments were supportive here. Some suggest to look into epilepsy, but the OP responded right after saying that they did, and luckily that wasn't the case. So, what do you guys think it is? Comment down below. I think definitely a time leap. That's pretty crazy. Number 2, dog treats and universe leaps. Anything involving dogs, I buy into it. I mean, who would lie about dogs for attention, right? Only psychos, I guess. Username mememan42069 says, when I was getting ready to go to my brother's house, I packed some stuff for my dog since he was coming. I put my dog's toys, leash, 2 dog shirts, and treats. I packed them all up, and when I got to my brother's house, I was looking for my dog's treats, and my dog's treats were not there. I vividly remember putting my dog's treats in a bag, and the weird thing was, when I got home, his treats were in the exact spots that I picked it up from, and it didn't fall out of the bag, and somebody didn't put it back because I live alone. So I was thinking maybe I slipped into a parallel universe where I didn't pack my dog treats. I've been weirded out by it for the past year, and I've been trying to come up with a better reason. I mean, that sounds alarming, 100%, but panicking about anything that involves dog treats, it's just hilarious to me. Sorry. Yeah, I hope you figure out your problem, but more importantly, I hope your dog doesn't get stiffed on treats again. And finally, number 1, 2016 again. This one caught my attention, caught it real bad. Posted 5 days ago by user Silence v Silence. They say the universe is currently shifting, and it has been the past few days. The last time a change took place like this was November 2016-ish. Some of you already know this. I'm sure you felt it in the air over the past week like I have. It feels positive. I hope it is. First comment has tons of upvotes here, and it says, your ears ringing real bad too? Question mark. This is insane because my ears have been ringing a lot in the past.
Number 10, the stone cabin. Everyone needs that friend in your life that will save you from a potential horror film, you know? Like that friend who says, no, let's not go into the basement after we hear creepy whispers. Let's not stop on the road after we might have seen a werewolf. Thankfully, this woman had that kind of friend, but was a minute too late. According to a BuzzFeed article, one night, a woman and her friend were camping when they heard strange music. They followed it to a small stone cabin where they reported seeing people dancing wearing fashion from the 17th century. The one woman, curious, tried to enter the cabin, but thankfully her friend pulled her back. But her body had already gone halfway inside, and when her friend removed her, the one half of her body that made it in was paralyzed. Number 9, Lorena Garcia. Imagine waking up one morning and slowly realizing that everything around you looks a little too different. Well, that's exactly what happened to Lorena Garcia. Upon hearing her story, it's hard to deny that this is anything but a case of multiverse travel. She woke up one morning to find minor differences in her bed sheets, pajamas, which fair enough, she might have just been groggy, but then she went to work, and her office wasn't hers because she worked in an entirely different department under a boss she never met, though she worked in the same building. Shaken, she goes home only to find her ex at her apartment. But they're dating still, and her new beau is nowhere to be found. I can only imagine how stressful this day must have been. It is no wonder that Lorena came to the conclusion that she did, that she is from a parallel universe and that she must have somehow traveled here in her sleep. Number 8, Yopar Voron. When Yopar Voron was questioned by authorities, no one could make any sense of his answers. He spoke some strange version of German and claimed to be a part of the world called Sacria. Sacria was a part of an entirely separate continent, he said, and he began recounting the differences between our world and his. He said they had a Christian-like religion and were separated from Europe by vast oceans. The reason for his visit was to track down his long-lost brother, but he got lost after going through a traumatic shipwreck. He tried looking on any maps he could find, but could not trace his journey on any of the maps found. Whoever he was and whatever happened to him, Voron is often used as evidence of universal travel. Number 7, Pedro Ramirez. One of my biggest fears is getting so lost I can't find my way back. So, while coming across this story, I was flooded with some pretty terrifying images. This next story happened in 1986 to a man named Pedro Ramirez while he was driving from Seville to Alcalá de Guadira, which is where he lived. While driving around a curve in the road, as usual, he suddenly came onto a 6-lane highway, something he was obviously not used to. But then around him, he started seeing 20-story housing units, weird, unfamiliar structures, and grass that stood 2 feet high. Soon after noticing these strange things, the inside of his car suddenly became very hot, and he started hearing voices telling him that he was being transferred to another country. He then found a place to stop so he could get his bearings, and once he got back into his car, he saw a sign out of nowhere with 3 different locations. He took the one that said Sevilla Detour because he recognized it, but drove only for a little while only to suddenly stop, realizing he'd arrived outside his home, not knowing how he'd gotten there. He tried to retrace his steps, but the signs were nowhere to be found. Number 6, Carol Chase McKelney. I'm getting the sense here that if you are looking to travel travel to an alternate universe, then just get in your car and drive down a lonely highway. In the case of a woman named Carol Chase McElhenney, it was nostalgia that brought her down a much distorted memory lane. While driving towards Paris, California, she saw a sign leading to her hometown of Riverside. Memories flooding back, she decided to visit. When she entered the town, everything looked remarkably different. The houses had all changed, her childhood home as well as her grandparents' house was grown over with weeds, and University Avenue, a place known for its restaurants and businesses, was covered in graffiti. But not only that, the people looked disturbed, and Carol had a weird feeling that if she spoke to them, she'd get stuck there too. So she found her way out of the town, back to Paris, missing the sorry sight as a town left to rot. Only years later, Carol's father passed away and was going to be buried in her grandparents' plot in Riverside. This time, when she returned, everything was back to normal, to how she remembered it. Carol believes she visited a parallel universe that showed an alternate reality of a ruined Riverside. Number 5, passport. It is not uncommon for people to be able to fake documents all the time. Passports, IDs, or a report card. Jokes, I'm kidding, I got straight A's, okay? Anyways, back to the story. When a man showed up in Japan with a strange business passport belonging to an entirely unknown country called Torrid, they thought for sure it was fake. The man told customs that he was in Japan for business, and despite the passport being strange, he had with him multiple legitimate visa stamps and currency from European countries. It was going to take a while to sort through everything, so they set him up at a hotel that was 15 stories up above a busy street. This is important to note because when they came to collect him, the man was nowhere to be found. Number 4, wrong turn. There is something eerie and beautiful about driving on the highway at night. Only possibilities and an open road in front of you. Unless you're these girls. 3 women were driving across the desert in Nevada but found themselves taking a wrong turn. Though before, the road was black asphalt. Now, the stretch in front of them was stark white cement. But not only that, instead of a desert, the grain field and a lake surrounded them. They were clearly lost, and while driving by a weird, illegible neon sign, decided to stop in to ask for assistance. But then suddenly, a group of strange, tall men poured out of the door looking distressed. They were waving their arms at the girls, but as they got closer, they realized that they weren't anywhere close to being human. They raced back to the car, passing strange egg-shaped tricycle-like vehicles like nothing they'd ever seen before. They pressed their foot to the gas and didn't look back after that, and before they knew it, they were back in the desert once again, with nothing but road and strange possibilities behind them. Number 3, green-skinned children. The green-skinned children is a legend from the village of Woolpit, Suffolk, England. The story goes that in the 12th century, 2 children, a brother and a sister, suddenly appeared in the village. They both had green-colored skin, wore weird clothes, and spoke an entirely unknown language. Despite their oddities, the village took them in, though initially refused any and all food offered to them. Eventually, they took a liking to raw beans, and then soon altogether food. The more they ate and the longer they stayed, the more the green color began to fade. Soon after this, though, the brother got sick and died. But the 2 children eventually learned to speak English too, just enough to explain where they were from. They spoke of a place where it was perpetually twilight, and had been helping their dad with the cattle when a loud bang sounded, and they turned up in Woolpit, and there they stayed. The young girl ended up growing old in Woolpit, even marrying, though people still didn't know where they even came from. Number 2, the doppelganger. How I Met Your Mother fans may hear the word doppelganger and recall the series of episodes where each of the leads meet their doppelganger. Hilarity ensued. What if everyone but you has met them? In this next story, it certainly seems as though something stranger is afoot. Reddit user, please probe me. Great, solid name, man. Used to work at a dog rescue place in Midwest with a close-knit group of 10 employees. Allegedly, the place they worked was haunted, but after this experience, he and his fellow employees believe that this place housed a veil between our world and another. His co-workers would often see him or a version of him in 2 places at once. He would be out in the front yard, only to be found moments later at the opposite end of the house. Here is just one example he recounts, and I quote, "Someone watched me go into the closet holding the water tank and followed me, asking me some questions about work matters. As soon as they turned into the closet, I was gone. I hadn't walked into that closet at all around that time, let alone on that day," unquote. Eventually, he made the difficult decision to leave the establishment, only to hear that his friends still continued to see him there working, though he's miles away. Number 1, the nerdy kid Gavin. This next story is from Reddit user Theus Eus and tells the tale of his suspicious friend. Gavin, or at least that's the alias he's been given. Gavin and Theus became very close friends, brought together by their love of World of Warcraft. Wow, what a great friendship! Gavin, though a bit awkward, was great to play with and apparently was a genius with an IQ of 180. One day, our Reddit user went over to his house unannounced to see if Gavin was around. He was surprised to see an older man of about 40 answer the door, who looked eerily similar to Gavin. He immediately assumed that he was Gavin's father, but then soon recalled that he didn't have a dad. His uncle, perhaps? When he asked to see Gavin, the man claimed he was Gavin, but upon explaining that he was looking for a 16-year-old Gavin, the man began to look uneasy. Theus asked when Gavin would be home, and upon hearing the answer, returned at the appropriate time. This time, his 16-year-old friend opened the door, and when he asked about why he wasn't home earlier, Gavin said he had been home and that no older Gavin lived there. The two never told anyone this story, and Gavin is currently studying quantum mechanics, so could it be that Gavin cracked the code and found a way to visit from an alternate universe? Who knows?
At number 10, we have I flew in from Torrid. Going to another universe sounds good, but you have no idea what's going to be on the other side. Maybe it's going to be really simple. Maybe it's a universe where everything is the same, but everyone's left-handed. Or maybe it's a reality where the Nazis won the war and O.J. Simpson leads a fighting force in America against the Nazi forces. Well, the man from Torrid probably wished he stayed back in his universe. It was 1954, and a plane just landed in Tokyo. Everyone was getting off and everything seemed normal. But then one dude halted everything. Custom officials ran out and started investigating this one guy. He had all his documents, but he was from a country that didn't exist. It was a place called Torrid. The man in question said that it was a very real place and that he had flown from Torrid to Japan many times. At first glance, this guy seemed to be a whack job, but then the crazy thing was that all his paperwork was legitimate. He had official stamps on his passport to back all of his stories and claimed that the country of Torrid was squeezed right in between France and Spain. The custom officials in Japan were stumped, and I understand why. There isn't anything in the training manual about how to deal with interdimensional travel. So they escorted him to a hotel, and he was not allowed to leave until the problem was sorted out. 2 guards stood outside of his door, and he was on the 15th floor, so there was no way for him to sneak out of the building. In the morning, the guards went in to take him out for more questioning, and the dude was gone. He disappeared like a fart in the wind, and that was the end of the story. I guess he didn't like how strict we were in our dimension. At number 9, we have The Beatles Ain't Dead. These were the claims of James Richard after he took a trip down Abbey Road and ended up in a parallel universe where the Beatles were still kicking. To start off, I have to say that James Richard is not this guy's real name. He uses a fake name so the powers that be won't find him. But his story goes like this. He says that him and his dog were going for a stroll through the Del Puerto Canyon in California, and then out of nowhere he fell through a hole in space and time. He woke up in another version of Earth. He was in a hospital bed, and there was a man named Jonas sitting next to him in the bed. And then Jonas started to give him the rundown on interdimensional travel. Through their discussions, they started to talk about music, and it turns out that Richards was in an alternate version of Earth where the Beatles were still alive and cranking out tunes. James Richard even brought back a cassette tape with the music of this living Beatles band. The cassette was called Everyday Chemistry, and it sounds like he just spliced together some Beatles songs and some Wings songs, but who knows, maybe this is what the Beatles would have sounded like if 2 of their members never died. At number 8, we have the Dobbses. Frank and Althea Dobbs were the leading minds in a new scientific practice called chaos science. It's the idea that consciousness could possibly be its own universe. They started to pick up some steam, and some other people decided to join their cause. They moved the team to a ghost town of Ong's Hat, New Jersey. Here they started to do research on interdimensional travel. I have to say, this does sound like a cult. Well, cult or not, they claim that they've succeeded in this practice. It's said that they found a wormhole which led them to a parallel version of Earth that never had been consumed by humans, and they chose to stay there. Considering the state of the planet right now, I would say this was a very good choice. At number 7, we have Whose Life Is This? You go to sleep a happy lady, and then you wake up and you're back with your ex-boyfriend? This sounds like a bender that you wish didn't happen, but for Lorena Garcia, this wasn't that at all. She woke up in her bed and she noticed a bunch of minor details were off. The setup of her room was a little off, and her sheets weren't the ones that she loved. Never mess with a lady's sheets. Then her ex-boyfriend walked into the room, but the crazy thing is, it wasn't her ex. They never broke up and they were still together. After this, she was like, okay, this is crazy, but I gotta go to work. So she went into her job, and she had a different job and a different boss who was someone she had never seen before, and she couldn't explain any of this. At number 6, we have Riverside Down. I don't know how you can go through an interdimensional portal without noticing it, but apparently this happens quite a bit. it. Carol Chase McElhenney was driving through Cali when she decided to take a short trip to her hometown of Riverside to see how things never really change. It can always be a little bit of a shock to go back to where you grew up, but this time things had changed a lot. Actually, everything had changed. The layout of the town was the same, but all the houses were different. The home she grew up in was warped. She was concerned that she had taken a wrong turn, but she found her old school which she went to, which was exactly where it should be. But then she started noticing strange figures around the town, people who looked a little off and definitely creepy. This was enough for her, and then she sped out of there. She returned to this town at a later date and everything was back to normal, but she never forgot that time she slipped into a parallel dimension. At number 5, we have interdimensional cabin. No, this isn't another movie pitch from me, although this would have been an amazing movie pitch. There's a cabin in the Markawasi Stone Forest that is said to open up a door to a different time. Some women were hiking through the woods and they saw some people outside this cabin dancing and lighting torches. Before you run away in fear, they weren't lighting torches to get all angry mob, but it was because they didn't have any sort of modern technology. They were all dressed in clothes that looked like they were pulled out of the Spanish Golden Age. The people dancing eventually entered the cabin and the women went to investigate. One of the women walked halfway into the cabin and her friend grabbed her and pulled her out. She immediately fell to the ground and couldn't move half of her body. Half of her body was paralyzed. The women ran away, and some people speculate that the reason the woman couldn't move half of her body after she entered the cabin is because she entered another dimension halfway and then was pulled out, which caused her body to get all screwed up. I don't really know if there's good science on this. At number 4, we have what road is this? The crazy thing about all these stories is how calm people are when they get transported to another world. Pedro Olivia Ramirez was driving through Spain and was headed to the town of Alaca de Guadarira. This was a drive he could do on autopilot. He had done it so many times before, but this time something went terribly wrong. He made a usual turn that should have led him down a small road, but he was suddenly on a 6-lane highway. He didn't recognize any of this at all, and everywhere around him there was these buildings that seemed like they were pulled from another world. Eventually he pulled off the highway, and to his surprise he ended up in Alaca de Guadarira. He tried going back to find this highway, but he never could. See, if that was me, I would be swerving all over the road and then would pass out from a panic attack. At number 3, we have a wrong turn. When you go on a road trip, you probably want to go cross country, not cross dimensions. There were 4 girls driving through a desert in Nevada, and out of nowhere things started to get a little strange. They saw street signs that had an unknown language on them. They didn't have any sort of markings of any alphabet that any of them could recognize. So what's the best course of action when you end up in a strange neighborhood? Well, you ask for directions, you silly little goose. So they saw some dudes hanging out in what looked like to be a truck stop diner, and they drove up beside them to ask them where they were. But then things got strange. These guys started to freak out, and it didn't take long for the women to realize that these guys were humanoids, but definitely not human. So they hightailed it out of there. This is when they started to get followed by some oval-shaped vehicles. The girl driving slammed on the gas, and she must have pushed it up to 88 because then they were back in Nevada, and the oval pursuers had vanished. At number 2, we have the Children of Woolpit. This story is bonkers. We're going back to the 12th century. Everyone in the town of Woolpit was chilling and doing a bunch of farm stuff and just trying to survive. You know what it was like back then. Then 2 kids came walking into town. They had green skin and spoke a gibberish language. The people took these kids in because they're kids and they seemed like they were terrified. They fed them, but the kids would only eat beans. Then not long after this, the boy of the 2 died. But the girl lived on. She eventually learned how to speak English and told everyone that she was from another world, somewhere where the sun never rose and it was perpetually twilight. She said she was on her father's farm and heard a crash, and then she was in Woolpit. She never found out where she was from, but she did eventually settle down and start a family. And for the number 1 spot, we have Shadow of a Doubt. Interdimensional travel is apparently impossible because space-time bends matter and light, but because of this bending of light, there is a chance that we could see shadows from another dimension. This could have been what happened to a young woman who was living in Massachusetts. She said one night she saw a shadowy figure appear in her room out of her closet. The figure moved close to her and then was followed by another. And then another. Some of them were wearing strange clothes, and one of them seemed to be wearing glasses. Then they started to surround her, and she did the smart thing and hightailed it out of her room. Of course, you're not going to stick around with the ghost things. There could be the chance that these were some sort of beings peeking in from another dimension.
Good egg! G'day Top 10 fam, we are back again with one of your favorite minds. Number 10, the Babushka Lady. The year 1963 might send your history teacher into a spiral about all things that happened in that year. On the top of that list was the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, the bullet that shook the nation. With multiple eyewitnesses yet no initial clues to who the shooter was, even though the case pretty much settled on Lee Harvey Oswald, there are still a ton of conspiracy theories surrounding his death. One of which surrounds a mysterious lady named the Babushka Lady, an unknown elderly woman who may have photographed the events. It is clear that she took multiple photos of the assassination, but none of her photos ever showed up. Despite multiple searches for the woman, she never showed up. To add more fuel to the fire, could it have been that she was a simple interdimensional traveler sent to document an alternate reality? Who knows? I mean, maybe there's a reason there's a might in the title, so. Number 9, Alexandria Alexis. You may have seen the side profile of a mysterious woman named Alexandria Alexis circulate social media a little while ago, around 2013. Then, if you were following the story, you may have heard that it was debunked. Or was it? For those of you who are unfamiliar, Alexandria Alexis was a mysterious actress who suddenly graced New York society in the year 1898. She took the stage by storm. Some adored her, others abhorred her, saying that the woman was likely insane. She kept saying she was from the future after all, specifically 2025. But in 1899 on New Year's Eve, she simply disappeared, never to be seen again. So, who was she really? Well, it is said that she wasn't a time traveler at all, but a British actress who appeared in New York named Grace Rawlinson. But if you look at the two pictures, they kind of look a little similar, but not too much. So was the mystery really debunked, or is there another weirder explanation that they don't want us to know? Number 8, D.B. Cooper. Okay, hate me if you want. I debated putting D.B. Cooper on this list, but here we are. It's part 3, okay? How does a man who no one knows steal a bunch of money, leap out of a plane, and entirely disappear? Unless you're some mysterious, mischievous Norse god. Tom Hiddleston, what's up? Love you. Anyways, the year 1971, an afternoon on November 24th in Portland, Oregon, armed with sunglasses and a will to pull off a mystery, the so-named Dan Cooper sidled onto flight number 305 bound for Seattle, Washington, bourbon and soda in hand. He made some cheeky eyes at the flight attendant. She blushed. Was he the one? I'm editorializing, but you're still watching, so sue me. He asked her to sit and slides her a note. Was it his number? Nope. It simply said that he had a bomb, not that he was da bomb, or she was da bomb. A rerouted plane, 4 parachutes, and $200,000 in $20 bills later, and Dan Cooper leapt out of the plane before he could break any more hearts, never to be seen again. It's one thing to disappear without a trace. He could have fallen into the ocean, but who was he in the first place? Cooper was a man without a past, in this universe at least, but who knows about the next. Number 7, Wolf Messing. The man who knew too much. A man so mysterious and enigmatic, he even had minds like Einstein and Freud stumped. Wolf Messing had to be from another world. Or perhaps he was simply a man who lived between them. Wolf Messing is most famous for a psychic prediction he made in World War II against Adolf Evil Man. In 1937, Messing said, and I quote, and I get to say his name right now, so sorry YouTube, "If declares war in the East, his death awaits him," unquote. He was specifically referring to an attack on Russia, which funnily enough, eventually came true. This prediction angered the German leader so much that he sent out a bounty of 20,000 Reichsmarks on his head. He was eventually arrested, but escaped after hypnotizing the guards that there were diamonds all over the floor. Damn, Messing. What a mess. But that's not all. Freud put him to the test himself in Einstein's own apartment. He gave Messing a mental command, then left the room. Messing was successful and did exactly as instructed. He left the room, grabbed a pair of tweezers, and pulled a hair from Einstein's mustache, all without Freud uttering a single word. Messing didn't disappear, but actually died in 1974. Whether or not he could physically travel between worlds, it does appear that Messing's talents were not of this one. Number 6, the lost colony of Roanoke. We've talked about individuals appearing and reappearing, but what about a whole group of people just The lost colony of Roanoke is one of the most famous disappearances in history. Great Britain tried to colonize this island a few times, initially attempted by Sir Walter Raleigh. They were already having trouble with a lack of supplies, as well as they didn't have a good relationship with the surrounding indigenous tribes. Gee, I wonder why. Anyways, they went back to get more supplies, and when mission leader John White returned, there was not a soul there. The fort was fortified, but not a single person remained. The only clue left behind was a cryptic word that said Croatoan, an island they thought the colony had retreated to, but they were still never found. Did some kind of mal event befall them, or did they accidentally find an entirely new world to explore? Only they know the answers. Number 5. Sir Victor Goddard. The year was 1935 when a winged commander named Sir Victor Goddard, what a great name, right? Took a flight he will never forget. The man was to fly his open cockpit biplane from Scotland to England, but he may have flown somewhere else by accident. He was passing over the World War I constructed Drem airfield in Edinburgh that was a bit of a fixer-upper. That was how he left it, but when he returned home 24 hours later, he flew into an unusual storm, causing him to lose control of his airplane. Miraculously, he recovered from a downward spiral just mere feet above a stony beach, but when he rose back up into the sky, the once stormy display was now overwhelmed by sunshine. And when he came across the airfield he'd seen when he left, it was entirely restored. There were planes he didn't recognize, along with men in blue jumpsuits, which was weird as the engineers typically wore brown. Not even Goddard himself ever unraveled the mystery, but one thing is for sure, Goddard took a detour that wasn't on the flight plan. Number 4. Håkan Nordqvist. Probably said that wrong. We try our best. Who would have thought that a portal to the future might exist under someone's kitchen cabinet? I mean, I've heard of like wardrobes leading to Narnia, but this is like a whole different thing, a little bit more scummy, a little more dirty jobs. And yes, I know this one isn't technically parallel universes, it's more time travel, but technically it's both because you might need to travel through a parallel universe to get back in time, so I think this counts anyways. Shall we? On August 30th, 2006, 36-year-old Håkan found a puddle on his kitchen floor, so he decided to crawl under the sink to sort out the trouble. But the cupboard just kept going and going and going until finally he saw a light at the end of the tunnel. Sounds pretty grim, but it's not. He said, and I quote, "In the end of the tunnel I saw a light, and when I got there I realized I was in the future," unquote. Out he crawled and he came across his 72-year-old self. He ran him through a couple of tests first, and the man knew things only he could know. There were things like where things were hidden when he was like 5 years old, and they also had the same tattoo. So he did what any self-respecting time traveler would do. They took a selfie. Check out this clip. Number 2, the Philadelphia Survivor. Ah, yes. The Philadelphia experiment. I bet you wondered when this little experiment was gonna make it onto this list, you cheeky monkey. Urban legend, conspiracy theory, the Philadelphia experiment remains a thrilling possibility. In 1943, the USS Eldridge allegedly was made invisible and teleported from Pennsylvania to Virginia. Did this actually happen? Who knows? But the movie definitely did, and it did nothing to help the conspiracy theories circling the world. But a man named Alfred Bielek found the film incredibly life-changing, as while watching it, he realized who he actually was, the lone survivor of the experiment. After seeing the 1988 film, Bielek's memories came flooding back, that he was actually Ed Cameron and he had been born in 1916. He'd been recruited by a secret mission called the Project Rainbow in 1940. He said Black Ops sent him through a portal in the Pentagon to Alpha Centauri. While there, aliens interrogated him and transformed him into his Al Bielek self at only 1 year old. That's one way to reverse the aging process, I guess. And a lot of people don't believe him. You can guess why, it sounds pretty crazy, but, you know, it's a crazy world. Who knows? Number one, last but not least, the story of Ron and Chuck Quinn. Whilst on the hunt for ancient gold in Arizona, Ron and Chuck Quinn may have stumbled upon something even older and far more mysterious. In 1956, the brotherly duo were 3 weeks into their adventure when they saw two strange large balls of blue-green light. Sounds like an alien encounter. Well, perhaps, though things get even stranger. They discovered that the lights were a reoccurring phenomenon in the area, and the brothers saw them several more times. Later on in their travels, they passed a stone archway that looked odd among the landscape. They discussed it with a local native named John, who warned that anyone who passed through it never returned. See where I'm going with this? They even threw rocks and stuff and nothing came back. It was nicknamed the doorway to the gods, for on top of the disappearances, some reported seeing shimmering figures through the doorway. When the brothers returned to it, at first nothing strange happened. They threw stuff through it, dropped dead on the other side, not a big deal. Until one day, the door started shimmering. The men vowed never to return, except 4 years later Chuck couldn't help himself, so he ventured back and sought out the archway. When he got there, he saw the archway and also a canyon that he didn't remember being there. But when he went to return on his way back, he suddenly realized out of nowhere he had just traveled 250 yards away from where he was when he began his descent back, having no recollection of traveling that far. Did Chuck enter the doorway and something erased his memory? I suppose we will never know. Number 9, Jill Perez. I'm actually kind of jealous of this one. If I could have any superpower in the world, it would be teleportation, hands down. I think about this a lot actually. Want pizza for lunch? Boom! Italy. Need a little vacay beach time? Boom, baby! Jill Perez may have unlocked the secret to teleportation hundreds of years ago in the 1590s. The key is you have to be really, really tired. It's a wonder that this hasn't already happened to me. Jill Perez was acting as a sentry for the Governor General of the Philippines, which requires a lot of standing and waiting. While he was on duty, not doing a very good job evidently, he heard the general had been assassinated, and due to the long hours, he started to feel faint at the news and took a moment to brace himself and closed his eyes while leaning against the wall. When he opened his eyes, he was surrounded by soldiers in uniforms unlike his own, and after they arrested him, he realized he was in Mexico? He told them what had happened to his general, and when they discovered he was telling the truth, they sent him back via ship. Just how he got to Mexico is a mystery, but I will consider carrying my passport with me at all times, just in case this ever happens to me. Please? Come on, I want some ramen. Number 6, Utsuro Boon. This one could have a relationship to alien technology or interdimensional travel. There's a reason there's a might. You decide and I'll let the story speak for itself, shall we? The setting, 19th century Japan in a small village. According to scrolls recording the incident, a strange ship shaped like a rice bowl washed ashore. It had glowing lights inside and looked nothing like anything anyone had ever seen. Sounds like an alien ship crashed, right? That's what I thought. Well, it could be, but upon the description inside, it may sound a little too familiar to be from beyond our world. When villagers peered inside the ship, they saw food that looked similar to candy, as well as a kind of plush carpeting, very 60s or 90s depending. Then, when the ship opened, an alleged 18-year-old red-headed woman with white hair extensions clutched a strange box emerged. She didn't speak their language and no one could figure out where she came from. Something about this story sounds too familiar, especially with the hair extensions, and it makes me wonder, could this be a ship from the future or another future that somehow landed here? With no way of knowing, I guess we might as well have fun with the answer. Go for it! Let us know in the comments. Number 5, Ettore Majorana. Ageless, elusive, and remarkably intelligent. Just 3 ways to describe Ettore Majorana. A man who disappeared, then reappeared, leaving questions in his wake every single time. Majorana was a scientist born in 1906 that made major headlines, not only due to his discoveries, but because of his disappearances. Being plural. He was pronounced dead at age 32 after he allegedly tried to flee fascist Italy to take up residency in Buenos Aires. A plot revealed by a lone witness who said he met him twice before he disappeared. The witness stated that both times they met, Majorana revealed different scientific discoveries he made, but when the man vanished, they assumed he died. That is until a strange photo turned up decades later. In it was clearly Ettore Majorana, taken 20 years after he died, posing with another man and did not appear to have aged a single day. The photo was then re-evaluated in 2011 and it was confirmed that the man in it was in fact Majorana. My question is, what was he researching and what did he learn? Is this a question of time travel, or was Majorana able to figure out the impossible, interdimensional travel? Wherever he is, who knows if we will ever see him again. Number 3, Diderichi's disappearance. There have definitely been a few epic prison escapes in the past through various methods, you know, the old digging a hole with a spoon, bribing a few guards, planning an outside job. But Diderichi managed to disappear into thin air. In 1815, Diderichi was serving time in a Prussian prison for impersonating and extorting his dead employer. The prison was infamously heavily guarded and housed some of the most cunning prisoners in Europe, but no one has any explanation for how he escaped. On his way to the exercise yard, suddenly Diderichi's shackles were empty. The man had disappeared into plain sight and left guards aghast as the shackles once around his wrists clattered to the floor. After several investigations, they finally ruled his disappearance as an act of God, or a crack in the space-time swallowed him up. I think both are equally likely. What do you think? Number 2, the runner. This is the tale of James Warson, a man who loved to run, though some would say a little too much. He was a British shoemaker in the 1830s, see 1800s again, right? With a passion for running that made him famous in his town. Not only was he fast, but he had incredible stamina, qualities that led to a bet made with his friends that said he couldn't run on a 16-mile well-known trail without stopping. Warson was a betting man, so of course he took on the challenge with relish. It became a whole event. His friends brought a horse and carriage with them to travel with him to watch, but a few miles into the race, he vanished in front of their very eyes. Warson tripped and let out a piercing scream, but not due to pain. His friends reported seeing a look of terror on his face, unlike anything they'd ever seen, as if he saw something right in front of him that scared him to his core. Seconds later, he vanished into thin air. They searched the area extensively, got the police involved, but nothing. No trace was ever found of him ever again. That secret remains with Warson, wherever, whenever he is. And last but not least, we have our number 1 spot, Stephen Kubacki. Disappearances are never simple, but this one continues to boggle the minds of even the man who disappeared himself. In 1978, Stephen Kubacki was excited to take on the skiing trails near Lake Michigan, but when he still hadn't returned the following day, the search began. They searched for days, but the only traces they found led to one dead end after the other. The first discovery was a set of footprints where Kubacki said he was going, but they stopped right at the edge of a frozen lake, with no signs of further footprints or clues that the ice broke. Sure, it could have snowed over, but there was no like little divots or anything like that. They just simply stopped. Next, they found his skis and his backpack, but no sign of the skier himself. Eventually, the search was called off, but his family held on to hope. A year later, they were rewarded when Stephen suddenly showed up at their doorstep, having little to no memory of what happened. He said earlier that day, he woke up hundreds of miles from where he disappeared in a field in Pittsfield. He was wearing clothes that weren't his, he had maps he didn't recognize in a strange bag that also wasn't his. Stephen remained recluse and isolated after the incident and refused to undergo any offerings of hypnotic regression. Whatever happened, he had no desire whatsoever to remember it. Could it be that somehow Stephen traveled somewhere no one was supposed to go? It looks like not even Stephen will ever know.
You may think that Back to the Future is just a movie, but there have been lots of self-proclaimed time travelers in the past couple of years, so let's look at some of their crazy claims. First up is the 2030 Traveler. A time traveler known only as Noah claims to be from the year 2030. Now this story I'm telling you is from 2017, so just keep that in mind. He turned up on the radio show Kyle and Jackie O and told them that he traveled multiple times in the past but was stuck in the present day. I usually went from like early 1999 to like 2018 around here, but when I got stuck I was in the year 2017, he explained. So How does he do it? I have many body implications and things all over myself, and I step in this giant dome and these things fire up, and basically a large electronic weight basically pushes you through time. It feels like you got electrocuted, he said. Now, one of the most shocking things was that he claims that us humans will be able to communicate with aliens. He said, "We've confirmed the existence of aliens, but they're not incredibly intelligent. Right now, the government has communication with them, but we don't know it. In the future, we actually are in contact with aliens that are just as smart as humans, although we have many more advancements over them," he said. Now, of course, his claims have attracted skepticism, and in response, he agreed to take a lie detector test on camera. He listed events he said will happen in the next 12 years, and then the interviewer asked if he was telling the truth, and the machine records that he is. I mean, I guess this guy is legit. Up next is the chain of events. TikTok user Eno Alarkic, who is a time traveler from 2671, has gained thousands of followers on the app by posting warnings about future events. In one video, Eno wrote, "Attention, I am a time traveler from the year 2671, and I'm here to warn you about these 5 dates to come. November 30th, 2022, the James Webb Telescope discovers a planet that is a mirrored version of Earth. January 1st, 2023, a plane flying over the Bermuda Triangle goes missing. March 3rd, 2023, a message is received all around the world that seems to have come from the ocean. May 15th, 2023, a 750 mega tsunami hits the California coast, mainly San Francisco. And June 18th, 2023, 7 people mysteriously fall from the sky, but there was nothing flying in that area." Now, how believable is this? Well, I don't really think any of this happened, but just the thoughts of these events even happening is chilling. Moving on to the alien invasion. On March 23rd, 2023, a time traveler who warned of an alien invasion claims that said extraterrestrials had arrived on Earth and abducted 8,000 Earthlings. The champion has arrived to bring 8,000 people to another planet, they said. The so-called time traveler warned of a very hostile alien species known as the Distance that are coming to take back the Earth. It's a fight we will not win. They claim that the champions were looking for the best engineers, scientists, doctors, and leaders, and these 8,000 people are what keep the human species alive from inside and outside threats. Thankfully though, they add, "I want you all to know that you are safe, and I'm trying to warn you of what's to come." Now, last year we were having all those weird UFO sightings. Could those have been related to this incident they are talking about? I don't know, maybe. Now we have the dangers of technology. A time traveler claims to have come back from the future to warn us all of an impending apocalypse, humans versus technology. They said there was one huge computer controlling everything, which is not controlled by a person, but makes all demands and decisions itself. Apparently the computer had the power to destroy the entire planet at once. So did this person really just confirm that we live in a simulation? I think so. Now, speaking to the camera, the time traveler who had his voice and identity changed to protect himself said, "I was not born here, I was born in 3258 on December 1st in the European Empire." Now, the time traveler explained that he was drafted into the army at 18 and wore a uniform made of gold and saw everything that happened in 3260. He said there were not only robots, they were very clever and can take the decisions communicated with each other. He said the war began on September 21st, 33,000 when he was 42, and that there has never been such a war on the planet. It was fateful and tragic for all people all over the world. Now, I'm not gonna lie guys, I feel like this is plausible and makes me scared, but I won't be alive in 33,000, so I don't really have to worry. Now let's talk about the alien war. A time traveler from the year 2858 has claimed the world will end in 2038 during a war with an alien species that has apparently already invaded Earth. A mysterious social media user who claims to be a time traveler from the year 2858 has claimed to know how the world is going to end. The user claims that aliens have come to Earth to take over the planet, but the war apparently won't start until 2024. Now, guys, let me remind you that we are in 2024 right now. They said the first war will begin in early 2024 and will end in 2038 with the Earth being destroyed. Captioning the clip, they added, "Another species of aliens save us, but not the planet." The first being that everyone would dream of an alien invasion by a species called the Zels on February 28th before the actual invasion, which was supposedly meant to take place on March 2nd. Now people took to the comments to debate whether the alleged warnings could come true or not. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Catastrophic events are next. A time traveler from the year 3036 has left us some scary messages about the future. In a series of videos posted on his channel, the mysterious traveler claims the world's population in 3036 will reach record levels, with domestic animals such as cats and dogs considered exotic. Now, he also warned of something called the Big Blackout. The Big Blackout, if I'm not mistaken, happens in December 2052. Basically, everything goes dark for an upward of 5 years, the internet, the power, it all gets disconnected on account of what's called the terrors, but many speculate otherwise. Anyway, 5 years, it's turmoil, riots, you name it, it's pretty much the worst of times. It takes them upwards to 20 years to get the power back online, and even then it's absolute chaos. Now, he also added, "You're as free as you're ever gonna get right now," he said, staring directly back into the camera. "These are considered the last days of freedom. Your kids won't even see it, so suck it up, because as simple-minded as your time period is, you got it pretty good, you just don't know it." Yeah, that is scary. I do not like that. Then we have the end of humanity. A TikToker that goes by Javier claims to be a time traveler. Javier's first video, posted in February 2021, depicts scenes throughout the city of Valencia, Spain that look relatively normal, except for one fact: the city appears to be completely void of people. In the video, which has been viewed over 7 million times, he claims to be a time traveler from the year 2027. He says that by then humanity will have gone extinct. A translation of the text within the video describes the eerie scene. Nobody in shopping malls, nobody on the streets. In a video posted soon after, he adds, "I keep trying to find human life, I'm starting to lose hope." Now, what happens to humans, he doesn't say, but 2027 isn't too far away, and we have to prevent whatever he claims will happen. On to the time travel program. A disguised woman who has introduced herself as Mia claims to have been recruited into a secret US time travel program before she finished high school. The alleged time traveler said she was offered good money to travel nearly 600 years into the future, where the world is completely different to how we know it today. Allegedly, the world faces the irreparable consequences of climate change, the rise of artificial intelligence, and aliens settling on Earth. Now, this seems realistic. Now, by the year 2600, the concept of independent nations will cease to exist, and humans will be ruled over by a world government run by AI. At the same time, humans will supposedly live in 11 megacities spread across the globe, where they will coexist with smart robots and aliens. The time traveler said, "I visited the year 2600, and it's very hard to explain to you what it was like because it's so different from the world we live in today. I saw robots, aliens, and human beings all living together in peace." And she added that, "I talked to people from this time and they told me how the world had changed. They said that the red sky was caused by global warming and that they all had microchips in them that made them smarter than their brains normally were. They said countries no longer existed and that the whole world was governed by AI." Yeah, that sounds terrifying. Next up, we have Trevor the Time Traveler. Self-proclaimed Trevor the Time Traveler is from the year 2049, and he claims to know when World War III will break out. He claims to be visiting from over 2 decades into our future in search of his pal Roger, aka Kronos. But while on his so-called mission, he stopped to make videos warning people of what's to come, with claims about catastrophic events from aliens to natural disasters. However, among these warnings, Trevor claimed to know when World War III would break out and shared information to his followers. In a clip, Trevor wrote, "Here are 3 dates that something terrible is going to happen. Remember this date: February 21st, 2024, something very big will happen. May 29th, 2030, a 3rd World War will start, lasting 7 years between the North and South. And 2037, the war ends and the second baby boom happens, growing the population too high." And last on our list is that the US is destroyed. A TikTok time traveler posted a video saying, "I'm a real time traveler from the year 2236, and I've come to a date and time to warn you about upcoming events in the next few years," they wrote. They said in 2022, scientists discover a way to bring back the megalodon shark through using its DNA, and they create a real megalodon in 2023, and surprisingly nothing goes wrong. In 2025, scientists discover signs of life on 2 different planets, and they're proven to be more advanced than humans, they predicted. A meteor will come down to Earth in 2034, 2034 and will wipe out half of America, they said, and the alleged time traveler suggests that 50% of the US would be destroyed in just 12 years. The self-confessed Time Lord made another forecast for the upcoming decade, as they predicted the Maui dolphin will become extinct. Now this isn't all. The TikToker also claimed that Disney will buy another large film studio, and one of the largest tornadoes will hit North America, causing many casualties. Now, while we don't know if the Meg is back yet, I think this is believable. We'll also just have to wait until 2025 to see if they're right. Well, that's all for our list of the top 10 scary messages left by time travelers who warned us about the future.
Yes, there really are people out there who claim to have traveled to the future, and they have some pretty wild stories about what's gonna play out. Alien invasions, the death of all the world's birds, human-robot hybrids replacing regular humans completely, and even human-chimpanzee hybrids coming in 2024. Let's get into it. And we're starting off our list with a traveler who has some pretty bad news for animal lovers out there. John, a self-proclaimed time traveler, claims to have actually come from the year 4000 and traveled back in time with some interesting details about the future. Apparently, in the year 4000, technology will have advanced to such an extent that artificial intelligence dominates most of the world. He describes a world where AI merges with daily human activity, leading to a new era where biological and artificial entities coexist almost seamlessly. Seems like this is going to happen way sooner than the year 4000 though. One of the more specific claims John makes is about the way corporations will evolve in the future. He states that all companies will be owned by a single mega corporation that uses AI to manage its operations. This corporation supposedly designs, builds, and controls robots that perform nearly all types of jobs, pushing humans out of the workforce. According to John, the result is a society where human labor is no longer necessary and robots handle most tasks. John also notes that these advancements in AI and robotics lead to changes in the environment and the social structure of society. He also states that pets like cats and dogs won't be a thing anymore, and that all birds were destroyed in order to prevent them from colliding with flying cars. Aren't there a lot more things we could collide with, like driving normal cars, than like up in the sky? Why don't we destroy everything in our path, already? I don't know. That's an odd one. Next up, we have a man named William Taylor, who has some pretty wild things to say about the future, and interesting side note, he also passed a lie detector test, apparently. Now, I know lie detector tests aren't always foolproof, but not many people who claim to have traveled to the future have gone through any kind of test like that. So if that is true about the test, I don't know, that's kind of interesting. In 2018, a man named William Taylor claimed to have been part of a British intelligence project in which he traveled all the way to the year 8973. And he said that things were, or will be, actually pretty good in the distant future, so good in fact that he didn't even want to leave and come back to this time. Now, the only thing is that humans won't exist anymore, not the way we do currently anyway. Instead, a species of human-robot hybrids will populate the Earth, but no disease or crime will plague it, and these beings experience eternal life. Taylor also revealed some other intriguing information, like how time travel has actually been used by world governments since 1981. The technology was apparently reverse engineered from alien spacecrafts. A TikTok channel called Real TikTok Time Traveler started posting some pretty outlandish videos in 2022, mainly because this anonymous user claimed to be a time traveler. Is a channel the correct term when it comes to TikTok, by the way? Page? Like, do you say just like user? I'm very out of touch. I don't know where I am. Help me. But they've posted tons of videos making all kinds of claims about what the future holds, most of it pretty dark, because that's what people just love gobbling up. They claim to be from the year 2236 and mostly post about events that will be playing out over the next 10 years. Some of their standouts include, in 2025, scientists discovering signs of life on 2 different planets that are proven to be more advanced than humans, and a meteor coming down to Earth in 2034 that will wipe out half of America. So look forward to that. Alaric goes by the handle Radiant Time Traveler on TikTok and has shared some pretty grave warnings about the future. He claims to be from the year 2671, and in his latest video, he lets the fine people of the internet know about some of the notable stuff that's going to go down in the remainder of 2024. Keep May 15th marked down in your calendar because an alien race is going to show up on Earth and transport 10,000 people to another planet. But aliens coming to Earth isn't going to catch our attention for long though, because May 27th marks the beginning of the next American Civil War, which will then lead to the outbreak of World War III. But don't be too worried about your hands or feet being blown off in the war, because less than a month after the fighting kicks off, a new fruit will be discovered that helps regrow lost limbs. Also in June, the very first human-chimp hybrid will be created, and June 19th also sees a new type of storm form called a mind storm, which causes people to lose their minds and go on violent rampages. As if World War III isn't enough already. Now we have a 28 days later situation on our hands. But the best part of it all, summer, it's really gonna end with a bang. When real-life dragons are discovered in the Rocky Mountains. They fly, they breathe fire, and they even speak English. Yes, specifically English. Sorry to everyone else in the world. You'll just have to watch these dragons fly around while we chat with them. Next on the list we have Darkness Time Traveler. Now, our boy Darkness has a pretty ominous bio on his TikTok channel / page / whatever you call it, reading, "Darkness is coming. The Shadow Network is almost here," from the year 2858. The Shadow Network? Jankies. I'm guessing that's not just a TV station that shows clips of shadows 24/7. In Darkness's latest video, they claim that the solar eclipse that just went down last week was actually a smokescreen for a bunch of alien beings to fly down to Earth on meteors, obscured from our view because of the eclipse. Because apparently we wouldn't be able to see meteors flying down the Earth because it's a little bit darker out. These alien beings are known by many other alien species though as the Planet Enders, or Endids. They spell it two different ways in the video. Gonna guess they wrote the text in haste though to make sure we all got this information in time. People from 2858 can make spelling mistakes too. Anyway, the Planet Endids have invaded a plethora of planets across the galaxy, and aside from their warmongering, violent ways, they've also brought a disease with them to Earth, the same disease that wiped out the alien beings who apparently once lived on Mars. So these invaders have been among us for about a week now at the time of this recording, awaiting the perfect time to strike. Because you guys are kind of watching this in the future, at least compared to me, why don't you let me know down in the comments what's going on. Our journey through time continues with a mysterious man simply known as Edward. In 2018, a man calling himself Edward came out claiming to be a time traveler from the year 5000. He said he'd been part of a top secret government time travel mission in 2004, where he traveled to the year 5000. He gave an interview where he shared a photo of what he said was Los Angeles in the future, and according to him, the city will be submerged underwater due to massive flooding caused by climate change. To substantiate his claim, Edward provided a photograph which he said depicted the future state of LA. In the photo, he described seeing skyscrapers and other buildings submerged in water, with only the tops visible above the waterline. He also stated that in the future, the effects of global warming will cause sea levels to rise significantly, leading to widespread flooding in coastal cities around the world, including Los Angeles, and that the inhabitants of these cities will have to adapt to new living conditions, with the remaining population living on the water's surface. Next, we have the Greek military time travelers. In 2017, an anonymous man claimed that after serving in the Greek military for 6 years, he was invited in 2013 to participate in a top secret time travel project. According to his account, this project saw him travel to the year 3207, a journey that lasted 2 days. From his perspective, about a month after his story came out, another anonymous man from Greece also said he was a student, when in 2008 he was reportedly approached by a professor who offered him the chance to be part of a time travel experiment. He accepted and claimed to have been sent to the year 10,000. The purpose of this experiment was said to be related to gaining knowledge about a future war between humans and artificial intelligence. Again, I think they sent him way too far into the future if it's a war between humans and artificial intelligence. 10,000? That's pretty far up there. Maybe there's something wrong with the machine. And also, I mean, according to some other time travelers we've discussed already, that's a war we won't be winning. They could have just asked them, saved the whole trip. Next up we have Athos Salome, who's now being referred to as the modern day Nostradamus. He's made all these predictions about the future, a lot of them very similar to the type of stuff we've heard of before when it comes to end of the world conspiracies, alien contact coming soon, AI reaching a new level of awareness and taking over, more deadly natural disasters, a big war, soon we'll be able to communicate with the dead through artificial intelligence technology, you know, all your standard stuff. But what I find really genuinely interesting and kind of creepy about this whole thing is that I'm honestly not even sure if this Athos Salome guy is a real person. I've seen plenty of pictures of him, and I've read news articles quoting things he's apparently said. I've seen other people in videos quoting things he said. I'm one of them. We have a whole video on this guy on the channel. Check it out after this. But I haven't seen footage of him actually moving his mouth and talking on video. I've seen like one, but it's like a narrator over top of it and it's like low quality. It could be AI generated. And I mean, just look at him. Doesn't he look like he could be an AI generated image to you? I mean, all these news articles say he makes TikTok videos, but I can't find them. So what the hell is actually going on here? Who is Athos Salome? Is there a real person behind all these predictions, or is this some kind of artificially created thing? And if so, who created it? Next up, we have a man who claimed to have traveled through time with Barack Obama, Andrew Basiago. Basiago claimed he was part of Project Pegasus, a secret US government initiative that he says took place during the 60s and 70s. This project focused on developing technology for teleportation and time travel. He said he was chosen as a participant when he was just a young tyke because of his father's connection to the project. The technologies he mentioned included the chronovisor and teleporters. A chronovisor is said to be a device that allows users to view events from the past and future, while teleporters are said to enable physical travel across time and space instantaneously. But he didn't just go forwards in time, no, he traveled back to 1863, where he witnessed the Gettysburg Address delivered by President Abe Lincoln himself. Basiago was very public with his claims. At one point, he even ran for president, with part of his platform promising to reveal the secrets of time travel and teleportation technology. I mean, how did he not win the presidency? Doesn't everyone want to know all of these secrets? It was a cheap tactic, but I guess in the end, it didn't work anyway. Finally, we have the one and only John Titor. This is probably the most well-known time-traveling claim in the history of the internet. Now, of course, the whole thing is very far-fetched, but what is interesting about these posts are how detailed they are. Whoever this John Titor really is or was, quite the imagination. Or he's a real time traveler, obviously. So it all began in November of 2000 when someone started posting on online forums claiming to be an American military time traveler from the year 2036. They later start using the name John Titor in future posts, and according to Titor, he was sent back to 1975 originally to retrieve an IBM 5100 computer in order to read older programming languages in the future. He claims this machine was needed to debug legacy computer programs that existed in his time. And on his way back to 2036, Titor claimed he made a stopover in the year 2000 for personal reasons, and during this time is when he decided to interact with people on internet message boards. He gave detailed explanations about how his time machine and how time travel worked in general. He included diagrams and descriptions of its operation based on theoretical physics concepts. Till this day, it's still a complete mystery as to who this guy was. Was it just some dude having some fun? Was it a social experiment of some kind? We'll probably never know. What I do know though is that his whole story was a bit more interesting than just like, oh, aliens invade in the future. Going back from an old IBM computer? I don't know. Creative. Is there such a thing as alternate realities? Is it possible to switch into alternate realities by accident? Well, today we're exploring some pretty eerie first-hand accounts, mostly from Reddit, and some of them really do make you scratch your head. Let's get right into it. Our first story comes to us from Reddit user SadBlackCat666, who tells of the time they were introduced to their deceased great aunt. My maternal grandfather's sister passed away from cardiac issues in 2000. I was born in 2003 and was told for years growing up that this is your aunt, we'll just call her Laura here. She died from heart issues. I was able to understand the concept of death, dying from a very young age. So I understood that she passed away and that I would never meet her. Fast forward to 2014 or 15, I'm at a family function and my mom introduces me to my aunt. She explained to me, this is your Aunt Laura. I was shocked and told them both that I thought she died before I was born. She looked exactly like the woman in the pictures I was shown as a kid, so I knew it was her. They were both confused. After a bit of talking, I went back to hanging out with my cousins. However, the whole thing still spooked me for years to come. When I was 18, I asked my mom if she remembered this incident. She had no clue what I was talking about and still has no clue. She just doesn't remember a damn thing about what happened. I'm in my early 20s now and I'm still confused about the whole ordeal. I sometimes wonder if I slipped into a parallel universe where my great aunt was still alive in the mid-2010s. Striped Macaron posted about her incredibly harrowing near-death experience on Reddit. She'd been 25 years old at the time, driving home from work one night in Los Angeles on a curvy section of road on Sunset Boulevard. Suddenly a car spun out of control in front of her, blocking her lane with no time to halt. With another car beside her, options were limited. She instinctively swerved right then left to avoid collision. Then she felt a surreal flashback to a trip she'd taken with her mother to Disney World. She'd only remembered vague parts of the trip, but this particular memory wasn't one of them. This is when she was convinced her life was flashing before her eyes and that she was going to die. She screamed, "No, this isn't fair. Not yet," as she swerved all over Sunset Boulevard. But then she just stopped and suddenly found herself alone on the road, as if everything had been wiped clean. She drove back home and didn't see a single car the entire way. Sunset Boulevard on a Saturday night was eerily deserted. She reached home and parked the car, still no one in sight. Once inside, she called a friend asking her to confirm that she really was alive, just to ground herself back into reality. She was convinced she might be in a limbo state after death. She finishes by saying, "There was no way mathematically to escape it. There was nowhere for the car on the right to go. This moment has haunted me my whole life. There have been times when I have questioned my own existence. I've wondered if my life since has been a very detailed death trip and I'm actually lying on Sunset Boulevard." The next story comes from Reddit user Cold Old Duck. "I was picking up my mom and driving towards the same intersection I always went through. Lights were green. All of a sudden in my head, I felt and heard a split second of pure dread. Someone running the red and hitting me broadside right in the driver's side door. I could feel the crash, being crushed, the pain, the blackness, and it was instantly gone, just left with the dread and terror. I braked hard and slowed to an almost crawl stop at the intersection despite the green light, and a car came flying through the red at high speed a second or two later. Never knew why or how I knew, but it was terrifying. I felt like a cat who had escaped with one life less." Reddit user MaterialWolf8005 brings us this next story entitled, "I died and woke up in a parallel universe." I have sleep apnea, and sometimes if I sleep facing up, I will wake up gasping for air and choking on my saliva. Anyway, I was so tired I slept facing up. I remember waking up freaking out and gasping for air. As I looked to the ceiling, my vision started going black from all angles into a single point. Think of how an old TV turns off. After that, I was staring at myself through a mirror I have facing my bed. I remember thinking, "Oh no, I'm dead," as I looked at myself lying down. Then I saw myself moving as if I was waking up. I woke up. But the craziest part is that as soon as I woke up, I saw myself in the mirror staring at me, but standing up, not laying down. Now this world feels off. I was anxious and depressed, and all of a sudden, I'm fine. I feel like I died in a parallel universe and woke up in this one. It's so weird. I can't explain it, but I feel different. This next story is pretty trippy. It comes from Peyton Lay 0616, who seemed to have watched a monster truck completely vanish right in front of their house. They write, "This happened not too long ago. I was standing on my porch watching my kids play in the front yard. Our street has a crossroad intersection at the end, and I could see it from where I was. As I was watching my two kids, I noticed a big black truck, the kind that has floodlights at the top and bars in front of the grill, pulling up to the intersection from the left road. I saw a bald man driving and two other guys in the bed of the truck, and on the sides were two different flags. One looked like a French flag, I believe, and the other I had never seen before. They looked like they were celebrating, and I remember wondering if maybe their team had won a soccer game or something, because it looked like they were being loud. But the thing was absolutely silent, and I could see them whooping and hollering and chanting. Anyway, they turned down my street, coming towards me. I kept my eyes on them because they were intriguing me. I watched them turn down my street, start coming my way. Now, here's the tricky part. My neighbor had a big SUV in their driveway that blocked off my vision from part of the road, and once that truck, those two flags, and three celebrating men reached the part of the road obstructed by my view of the SUV, they never came back out. I even walked down into my yard to see if maybe they'd pulled into the grass of another neighboring house, but nothing. They just vanished behind the neighbor's car. Always awkward running into someone who recognizes you and you just can't remember their name, or worse, can't remember them at all. This story from Open Temperature 6440 kind of takes that to a different level. It goes as follows. This happened back in 2014. I went to Walgreens a few blocks from my house at night to buy a few items. While I was there, this guy down the aisle from me started talking to me like he knew me, but I didn't know him. Never seen him before in my life. He asked me how things are going and asked if I was still working for Joe. Joe was the name of my boss that I worked for a while when I was in college. I told him no, I wasn't still working for Joe because I'd graduated and gotten a full-time job. I was so confused and asked how he knew me. He seemed surprised that I didn't remember him and said that he was Joe's son, which is weird because the Joe I worked for didn't have a son, just two daughters. He could tell I was confused and asked if I was okay, and I replied that I was fine, but I didn't remember him. He was still shocked that I didn't know him. Eventually, the conversation ended, and I went on my way. A few months later, I ran into my old boss, Joe, and I told him I ran into someone that said he was his son, and asked just to make sure he didn't have a son. He said, nope. Not that I know of. I still don't know what to make of that encounter, but it was bizarre to say the least. My theory is that I somehow entered an alternate universe or reality, but I don't know. Maybe I dreamed the whole thing. Who knows? The following is a story from DSLY4425, who writes about a possible glitch in the Matrix. I remember writing a term paper in college about a specific disease and disease process that still exists to this day, and the treatment at the time, specifically that at the time there was no medication available on the market to treat it, although there was a lot of research being done. Fast forward 15 years, and I was debating with my pharmacist, who was also my boss, how long a medication for said disease was on the market, and we got curious and looked it up. In this dimension, the medication has been on market since the late 90s, which would have been high school for me. I definitely wouldn't have written my paper on the subject or gotten a high score on it, for that matter, if the medication really was on the market in the late 90s, as the paper was written in 2003 at the earliest. And I wrote the paper on that specific disease and process as I was working with patients directly impacted by it at the time, and had taken a good deal of extra training in my field of work, specifically with those patients, so I kind of knew my stuff and where research was heading, which at the time was developing the drugs that are now on the market, but none were out. Following story comes to us from Wolfie is Back in Black, who was in high school when this happened, living in the same neighborhood she lives in now in Mumbai. The area hadn't undergone much development back then, with dense vegetation covering what is now occupied by buildings. The Redditor was very familiar with the area, having spent her teenage years exploring its nooks and crannies with her then boyfriend. One day, they were lost in conversation and wandered towards the end of the road. Without paying attention, they turned right and accidentally walked into the last building on the lane, and what they found was very strange. In total contrast to the well-maintained surroundings, this particular building was dilapidated. like it had been bombed and set on fire. It had an eerie silence about it, devoid of the usual signs of life. No birds, no insects, nothing. There was moss growing in places and chunks of concrete had fallen off. They'd even seen the building. They had never seen the building before and hastily left, joking about the place looking like a haunted apartment. Well, 2 weeks later, she found herself in the same lane with her cousin, and lo and behold, that dystopian-looking building had completely transformed. It was painted in vibrant colors, flowers bloomed in pots, and there was vegetation surrounding it that would have taken months to grow. She approached a guard who was stationed nearby and asked him if the building had been recently renovated, and he looked at her like she was crazy and just said, no. From Reddit user Star884, we have the blue truck. The story goes as follows. My mother and I were on our way to a funeral. We stopped by the corner gas station to grab drinks on the way. I was in the passenger seat, my mom was driving. She turns around, not moving, but the car is in gear to where I thought she was backing out of the spot. I always look in the mirrors when anyone is reversing, just a natural habit. So thinking she's backing out, I was like, whoa, wait, there's someone coming. I saw a pretty big light blue truck coming very fast behind us. My mom says, cool, I see it, and stops. All of a sudden, there is another car coming pretty fast on the complete opposite side. The freaking blue truck disappeared though, just gone. It had nowhere to go. We were all literally about to crash all three cars. Somehow, it was gone. So my mom and I both saw the big light blue truck coming. We either had something happen or we had a shared delusion. And finally, we have a strange story from Reddit user London Mama 2019 who had a very strange experience in a graveyard. Probably the last place you'd want to have a strange experience in. I had taken my 6-year-old for a walk to the playground. We just moved houses, so didn't know the area well. So I checked my Apple Maps to see if there was a quicker way home, as my little one was starting to complain a bit. The quickest way was through a graveyard. We started walking and the birds were singing. It was quite sunny, perfectly normal. As we walked further though, the atmosphere just changed. It's really hard to explain, but it felt completely flat. No birds, no people, just a really oppressive feeling. We also noticed that some things looked not quite right, like gravestones facing in different directions. I'd never seen this before and it was bizarre. Some were in rows, some sideways, some facing the opposite direction, and there was a huge pile of dirt against the side of the little church. I didn't want to scare my daughter, so kept chatting. Then she seemed to notice it too and said, "This is horrible, I don't like it here." I checked my map and it had gone crazy. It was directing us the opposite way and kept changing and moving around. I followed the path round, and as the main street came into view, everything seemed to go back to normal. Birds, people, traffic sounds, even the sun seemed to get brighter. When we got home, we talked about it. I told my husband, my daughter called it the creepy graveyard. The following week we went back to show my husband, but it was like a different place, no weird vibes at all. It was very peaceful but completely normal, and we couldn't find the gravestones facing different ways. I read a book last week about time slips, and the way it felt was described by a few people who had experienced time slips. So now I'm wondering if this could be what happened to us.